The first thing I'd like to talk to you about, City Council's fall session is set to begin in a couple of weeks. What are your top priorities going into the fall?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to join you and Denise. I love talking City Council with you guys. For me, first and foremost is going to be looking at the revenue that we have as a city and what happens as it relates to transfer ordinances and how those dollars are appropriated as we close out this year's budget, because we do know that projections were a little conservative as it related to the June budget. And I'm curious to see what revenue looks like and what's the administration's plan on how we spend any leftover revenue this fall. Outside of that, I have a couple bills that I'm very proud of that I'm working on. We're really excited around them. One bill we're hoping is going to address illegal dumping. We have another bill that we're looking to do to address issues related to NIL, and that coming down the pipe. And then we're also looking at other quality of life things, as well as some interesting hearings that we know we need to have in order to examine things related to city departments, as well as city partners. And of course, for me, I'm always going to talk issues around education, youth, and young people. So that will be a part of our work this fall. And to close it out, we're going to continue to work around driving equality as it relates to that bill and analyzing the data and making sure that we're on track based on the legislation that was passed.
Tell us what NIL is really quick.
Oh, yeah, sure. Name, image, and like. It is something that's happening in sports where you're seeing a lot of college students getting deals. And pretty soon we're anticipating that the PIAA, which is the Pennsylvania Interscholastic Athletic Association, is going to vote on what they're going to allow for high school students, which means as early as this winter, we could have high school students in the city of Philadelphia who attend public schools getting NIL deals. And we want to make sure that it's regulated and there's no predatory behavior that exposes our young people to anything negative.
That is a little scary. I didn't realize it was going down to high school students too. I thought it was just going to be at the college level. Yes, that definitely needs to be regulated and considered.
Absolutely. And we're already thinking about it from a legislative perspective. We're talking to some of our state partners as well to make sure that when you are legally allowed to have those dialogues and conversations and give those opportunities to high school students, that is done in a way that's conducive to them and their families, and it doesn't put them in a position where it turns into a negative.
So you had mentioned something I was going to bring up a little later. That's the budget surplus that the city is looking at right now, just over $400 million or so. You mentioned you want to see what the administration has in mind, but what do you have in mind for those funds? What is the best use of that money?
I mean, I'm not going to say what's best for all of it because I'm just one of 16 legislators currently right now. So it's going to be a lot of different folks who have a lot of different opinions. But one of the things that I will say that's going to be a priority for me is witness and victim protection. That is a huge issue that we have in the city of Philadelphia. And when we talk about the crime that exists in the city, I do think that there are systematic problems like poverty and like a lack of quality education in every school that feeds to the poverty problem that feeds to the crime problem that we see in the city of Philadelphia. And of course, until you fix those systematic things, those problems are going to still exist. But I do think that we have some holes in the system right now that can at least scale back some of the crime that we're seeing. And so when we're talking about money for witnesses and victims, that's going to be a huge priority for me. I think as a person who really cares about and works with young people on a consistent basis, I'm already thinking about next summer. So I would like to advocate now that we appropriate the dollars that we need for next summer. We examine what happened with summer employment opportunities for high school students, because that was a debacle that took place this summer, considering all the issues that high school students are facing. For us to fumble some of the things that we did as it relates to opportunities for high school students is an embarrassment. So when you ask me what my priorities are, I'm thinking about what we can do around crime right now. And I'm also thinking about what we need to do to prepare for next summer right now, so that when next summer comes and presents itself, we don't see this huge spike in crime like we've seen this summer. There are other things as well too, but those are going to be my top two priorities as it relates to how the anticipated revenue that we didn't necessarily project to spend.
Okay. So when you speak with your colleagues and when you're discussing, just generally what you're thinking about doing, do you have a feel for what some of the bigger themes from City Council is going to be this fall, what people are looking at and what
No.
sort of thing? No?
No, absolutely not. I mean, at the end of the day, come on, let's be honest. You know what the temperament is around City Council. So, from a revenue perspective, I'm sure everybody's going to have their pet projects and ideas, especially things around rebuild and looking at what needs to happen with rec centers now that bill essentially has been passed, and we can begin to see even more development there. But outside of that, people will have their legislative ideas. People will have, that's always the case. People will have the hearings that they want to hear. That's always the case. Once, I'm happy to be on the appropriations committee, so I get to be directly involved in conversations dealing with how dollars are spent, and I get a vote on that side of things. But no, I'm not having that type of in-depth dialogue with other council members because the climate here right now is one that's probably more uncertain than what we've seen in recent history.
And is that because of the potential mayoral candidates?
Absolutely, not just the resignation that's already taken place. Just had to remind myself that there are 16 of us and not 17 of us, but the anticipated resignations that folks are talking about. So at the end of the day, I think that kind of cloud is over the legislative branch as it relates to who your colleagues will be, who will be the chair of certain committees, and how will we govern this fall.
Okay, so we're still dealing with this epidemic of violence in the city. And one of the key drivers of violence is poverty. When we look at the 26% poverty rate, are there things that council can do this fall to help chip away at that?
Outside of the programs and protections that we have already, I'm not sure. I don't want to, Larry, I don't want to say no. I don't want to say no is nothing that we can do. But I don't have any specific bills that I'm going to be introducing this fall that I feel like directly impacts the poverty. It is a huge concern. Philadelphia is the city of a lot of, not just a lot of poverty, but a lot of working poor and a lot of children that live in poverty. So at the end of the day, we're constantly advocating and fighting with our state partners to be able to see an increase in the minimum wage. I'm a strong supporter of the Shapiro-Davis ticket, and I think that is the right combination that we need to put us in a position to increase the minimum wage. We did take a vote in June that we hope will send a signal that Philadelphia is open for business, because we know that the more opportunities that we give entrepreneurs and business owners in the city of Philadelphia, especially homegrown business owners, the more employment opportunities are created for actual constituents here. But not to dance around your question, I don't have anything specifically that's coming down the pipe as it relates to legislation that can directly impact the poverty issue that we have that exists in the city of Philadelphia. But from a political perspective, I'm hoping to advocate and do what I need to do to help get the right people in Harrisburg so we can begin to see a dent in some of those issues that you just talked about.
Okay, I'd like to bring you Denise Clay-Murray here on the Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Hi, Councilmember. How are you? Thank you for joining us.
Good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, my question you mentioned that the vote that the city took that you hope will spur entrepreneurship. If my understanding is that had to do with the wage tax and some reductions being made to it. Can you talk a little bit about what your reasoning was behind taking that particular vote and what you see it doing for the city, particularly at a time where a lot of people who were working in city offices or offices in the city are now working from home?
Yeah, I think the wage tax cut was specifically to put us in a position where, number one, during the pandemic, we've really seen how much we rely on the wage tax and how dangerous it is from an economic perspective for our city to rely on the wage tax the way we do. When the pandemic hit and things shut down, the only major city in the country that lost more revenue than Philadelphia was Detroit. And that's not the way in the direction that we want to trend in. So one perspective around the wage tax is fiscal responsibility and trying to put us in a position where we don't rely on it as much as we did. But the Burt tax cut specifically was the tax cut that we're hoping sends a signal that Philadelphia is open for business. And we're also hoping that we can put ourselves in a position where we can attract different industries and encourage more entrepreneurship. So that was the thought process there. We're doing other work with other industries like the gaming industry and industries that are innovative to begin to hopefully brand Philadelphia as a place that is not just a city of eds, meds, and beds, but that's a city that's open to biotech. That's a city that's open to gaming and coding and other industries that we know are really taking off in other places across the country. So we know we still have work to do as it relates to rebranding our city and branding our city in a way that attracts different industries. But we felt like this past budget was a step in the right direction.
But you have a lot of people in the city who, because we're the poorest big city in America, are kind of questioning whether now was the right time to cut any taxes with people still trying to recover financially from COVID. What, I guess, have people approached you with that? And can you explain it a little bit?
Well, I think that part of the reason why you're seeing this tax cut now is because of the surplus of revenue that we talked about a little bit earlier. We do have a surplus in revenue as it relates to support that we've received from the federal government. We also had very conservative numbers as it relates to anticipated tax dollars. And we're coming into the fall with one of the biggest surpluses that we've had, definitely the biggest surplus we've had since I've been in city council. So at the end of the day, this was really the only time to do it. If you look at our 5-year projections in the direction that we're going in over the next couple of years, it'll be very difficult to do it in the future because we're going to, the 5-year projections put us in a position where we're going to have to dip into our fund balance in order to make sure that we're meeting our annual operating budget numbers. So at the end of the day, this was the only time from a fiscal perspective that we knew we would have the revenue to be able to do it and without cutting any jobs or cutting city services or anything like that, and still be innovative with a lot of the programs recommendations that the mayor as well as council members wanted to see. So, you know, I think it was the right decision. I stand by the decision, and I think we're going to see the positive outcomes over the next couple months.
Now, when we talk about gun violence in the city, over the summer, Council President Clark had a news conference with several other members of council in which he brought up, among other things, in terms of combating the violence, stop and frisk. Now, last year, you got a law passed that made it so police officers couldn't stop you in what some folks thought of as a rolling stop and frisk, where, you know, a tail light or something like that, you know, relatively minor stuff, you couldn't get pulled over for. But you have people who are like, should we really have done that? Can you talk a little bit about the reaction to your bill and how, and whether or not this was what you were expecting?
Yeah, it's 100% what I was expecting. Anytime you try to do things and you're fighting for the civil rights of Black folks, you're automatically going to see a lot of people who push back because there are a lot of people who benefit both personally as well as financially on the suffrage of poor people and people of color, but especially people of color. So I anticipated pushback. I knew there would be blowback, and none of that bothers me. We're focused on the work. We're focused on the data, and the data suggests that we're moving in the right direction as it relates to driving equality. At the end of the day, we're really proud of the fact that we do have an oversight committee. Those folks have been named, and that entire team has been working diligently throughout the summer and putting ourselves in a position where we are assessing what's going on. We're having constant conversation about motor vehicle stops in the city of Philadelphia, and we're doing everything in our power to make sure that the data reflects the intention of the bill. So the pushback that we hear is minimal, but is expected when you're fighting for the people that we're fighting for. And at the end of the day, we're going to continue to do the good work. And if the day comes where the data suggests that the bill is doing more harm than good, then I'll be the first one to introduce an amendment or look to appeal it. But right now, that's not at all what the data is saying. We are excited and we're optimistic about the direction that we're moving in right now.
Now, over the weekend, you and Councilmember Johnson had a basketball tournament. Peace Not Guns basketball tournament where you brought people in and let them play basketball as a means of keeping them from doing other stuff that could lead to gun violence. This is something you all have done over the last 2 years, and it's been successful. Has council talked at all about doing more of this kind of thing? Because let's face it, you know, we've tried a whole bunch of other stuff. Why not do something that kids can get directly involved in that keeps them from getting involved in violence?
I mean, I spent my entire summer being involved in prevention-based initiatives. Councilmember Johnson and I did the Peace Not Guns tournament this weekend, like you talked about. I think the most exciting thing about it was watching the young people and their responses as we honored families of victims who have been lost to gun violence, and looking at their faces and hopefully putting them in a position where we're encouraging them, and the mothers and the families encouraging them to do their best, to be their best self, to maximize their potential, and to try their best to stay out of harm's way. And the interaction between the two is something that's priceless. So at the end of the day, outside of that event, I also did a free camp for 3 weeks in all different parts of the city of Philadelphia. We had well over 150 young people attend the camp, operating from 8 to 3. Another example of a partnership with Councilmember Johnson, because we partnered with him to come to South Philly for the camp for the first time. And I've been doing this camp for 10 years. So the prevention-based initiatives is something that I have grown in as it relates to that professional space. I understand the space very well. And during my first 3 years at council, I've been screaming at the top of my lungs that we as a city do not offer enough free programming for young people. I'm pretty sure that I have one of the biggest camps in the entire city. The last week of my camp in Philly, we had about 130 children on a daily basis in camp. And it's a free program. It's a basketball camp, but I can tell you that, you know, at least 50% of the children who come to the camp don't play basketball. They're not there for basketball. They're there to have fun. They're there because it's safe, and their parents are signing them up because it's a free resource that's safe, that also teaches a lot of positivity. So at the end of the day, I've been screaming at the top of my lungs since I've been on city council that we do not do enough as it relates to investing in prevention-based initiatives. I get it when it comes to intervention-based initiatives, but if you're intervening, that person is already involved in the criminal justice system. If we are investing in prevention-based initiatives, we could catch a lot of young people before they get involved in the criminal justice system, and try to make sure that they have the tools and the resources that they need to be successful. And that is one place that we are failing as government right now.
Okay. Now, you also mentioned that you were going to be introducing some legislation related to witness protection. Witness protection has been a big problem in the city of Philadelphia. And I think this is one of the only times I've heard council or anyone on council even talk about addressing it. What made you decide to address it, and if you can talk a little bit about what it is you're hoping to get passed? I know you probably are still crafting the legislation, but if you could tell me just some of the stuff that may be in it.
I mean, what made me do it is the fact that my office and our team over here in city council, we've spent our entire summer doing a deep dive into the crime issue. I've been in gun court, I've been a part of briefings, I've been in the conversations, working with victims and families. I've done a really deep dive into the issue, and I still have a lot more work to do. The deeper dive I do into the issue, the more I realize that there are so many moving parts to the criminal justice system and the crime issue in the city of Philadelphia. And so with that being said, it's not just about witnesses, it's witnesses and victims. In the city of Philadelphia right now, the police and the district attorney, that collaborative effort, they're more likely to solve a crime if the person is executed compared to if the person stays alive. That's alarming right there, right? Like, that's a telling stat that we do better clearing cases when the victim is dead compared to when the victim is alive. So we need to do something different. That clearly tells us that our system is broken. And one of the things that I'm recommending is more money for witnesses and victims, right? Because at the end of the day, it's one thing to provide dollars for a witness, but also we need to be able to provide more support systems for victims, not just some level of protection, but often some level of relocation needs to happen to coincide with that protection. So at the end of the day, what we're going to be fighting for is more revenue. It's not necessarily legislation that would change how we treat witnesses or victims. I'm on the appropriations committee, and we want to see some revenue as it relates to a transfer ordinance specifically targeted to the specific demographic that we're talking about, which is witnesses and victims.
Okay, I have one last question. As you know, for all intents and purposes, the 2023 mayor's race has started, which means many of your colleagues are seriously thinking about whether or not they're going to resign to run. You are one of the youngest members in council. And I remember covering your campaigns and seeing you, try to negotiate the fact that the city's coat of arms should say that's the way we've always done it. And they're pretty committed to that. I wanted to find out if you were talking to one of your mentees who was interested in pursuing a career in politics and wanted to run for city council at large or even a city council district seat, what would you tell them and why?
Oh, I asked him, are you crazy? Like, what are you thinking? No, in all seriousness, it's a lot. I've run 3 times. So, at the end of the day, I'll be seeking re-election next year, God willing. And the first, it's a lot of advice I would give. I probably could do a whole show just on what it would take to run for city council, specifically council at large, because the race is its own dynamic. It's its own DNA. It's like a combination of running to be a legislator as well as running for judge, right? Because you're not necessarily running against a person. And I think sometimes demographic politics puts us in a position where we feel like we're running against somebody because we fit this similar demographic, and people will say that it's only such and such, only this many of a type of person can be on city council. So the first thing I would say is ignore demographic politics. Don't put yourself in a position where you feel like your competition is the other people running. You're running against yourself, and that's what makes this race unique. Your goal is to touch as many people as you can, and it's very difficult to do that when you don't have money, especially when you're talking about an open mayoral race where you're going to see a lot of the airways being congested with folks encouraging people to vote for them for mayor. So, with that being said, outside of the revenue, I would also tell people to look at your personal life, because when you decide to run for office, it's not just you that's impacted, it's your entire family. Your time is impacted if you're doing it the right way. Being a candidate is your full-time job. So at the end of the day, you're often unable to pay your bills. I think that's a significant part of running for office that people don't realize, is that it monopolizes so much of your time that if you're a credible candidate, it's impossible to run for office while simultaneously working a full-time job. I tried it. It's doesn't have a good outcome. So at the end of the day, those are just 2 things off the top of my head, that I would talk to people about as it relates to your personal life, as well as your network. Like, do you have the network that can put you in a position to raise the money that you need? And then also, are you able to take the sacrifices that's needed as it relates to your personal life, not just financially, but with your time, to put yourself in a position to campaign for 4 or 5 months. It's very, very difficult. I'm blessed to have the support systems that put me in a position to be able to do it multiple times. And if you were a mentee of mine, I would have got you started well before today. That's another thing.
Okay. Well, thank you, council member. I'm turning this back over to Larry McGlinnan. You're listening to Hold On.
Thanks, Denise. Councilman, one last question before we let you go. As Denise said, we are in this election cycle already, whether we like it or not. So what are the qualities you are looking for in the next mayor?
That's a great question. I mean, what I'll say is a lot of qualities. You have to be a visionary. We have systematic issues that need to be corrected. So you got to understand the system and the infrastructure and the problems that we're dealing with. But honestly, I think that the one piece of advice, and I remember being on a panel in Atlantic City with some of my council colleagues, and we got asked this exact same question, and they actually made me go first. And I'll say what I said there because I feel the exact same way. Outside of being a big picture thinker, outside of having being able to develop plans for systematic problems, especially when we're talking about how government works, even on the education side, how the school district works. We have a lot of systematic problems, infrastructure issues, and things that require complex thinking and innovative solutions. And, I can do a deeper dive into some of these systematic problems that we have in the city. Outside of all of that, I think that the biggest issue that we have is the cloud of depression over the city of Philadelphia. So I think that the next mayor, no matter what the circumstances are, no matter what's going on, you got to be able to grab the mic, go in front of the camera, and make the citizens of Philadelphia feel like everything is going to be okay. And I think that is something that we take for granted. I've run for office a lot of times, and I think that it's important that we put ourselves in a position where we recognize that people are depressed. The city is depressed. People need to be inspired. And at the end of the day, with some of the catastrophes that we've faced over the last couple of years, it's imperative that people feel like they have a good quality leader who they can depend on, who they know is thinking about the best interests of the city 24/7. And the biggest thing is that we need a mayor and a leader who has the ability to make people feel like everything is going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay. And I'm going to be able to fix the issues that we face as a city. Because even if you can have the ability to have that innovative thinking, to be able to come up with systematic solutions, you still need to put yourself in a position to address some of the perception issues that we have as a city. And that's something that's very difficult.
All right, Councilmember Isaiah Thomas, thank you so much for being with us.
Yes, thank you.
No problem. I got somebody who wants to say hi to y'all. He's coming right now. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Oh my.
He's been in hiding and listening. So he's like, say hi.
Hi. Hi.
Buddy.
My boss for the day.
Wow, I remember
Now,
when he
is
was
that
our
IQ?
baby.
Yeah, this is IQ, and Dom is working from home, so he's running the office today. Say hi.
Okay.
Hi.
So he's been like in the back crying because he hears me and he couldn't come in.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, so
Well, it's good to see you.
Yeah.
Say hi.
And thanks for letting your dad come on with us
Yeah,
today.
thanks for loaning us your dad.
He's not speaking right now.
Aw.
He normally
Well,
loves the electronics and stuff. So thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you,
You're
Councilman.
welcome.
Want to say
Bye.
bye-bye?
Bye.
Bye. Here you go. Give him a bye.